I just want to quickly introduce the two folks we have here. First, on the far end, we have Morgan Hammerstrom, who is leading research at
Snapchat.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's a good one. And then we have Cindy, who up until recently was leading at
CashApp.
Cool. I've heard of that one. That's in some rap songs too. That's like part of the culture now. Oh my God. So what I'd love to do just to start, because obviously research is not like its own thing. It's like kind of like a function that attaches itself to other functions to help them be more effective if you're doing it right. I think, Alicia. Yeah, we're like a parasite.
I'm going to disagree with that, but...
Can Morgan, let's start with you. Can you describe a little bit about the product culture at Snap and how research kind of fits into that, right? Because in a lot of more like, let's say, enterprise software functions, it's very much, move it down the assembly line and then research does its thing, passes it off to the next. Does that work for you?
Yeah, so I think research at Snapchat is very much its own thing. We definitely have a seat at the table. Product at Snapchat, though, is very unique. And I don't know how many people have used Snapchat. I'm guessing kind of a lot of the students have. The UX isn't the best. We don't really have a streamlined process that a lot of these kind of product teams have, where it's like, come up with an idea, do usability study, can users do it? Okay, let's ship. We kind of have a different philosophy, a very unique process of like, if they want it, they'll figure it out. So that makes our jobs kind of difficult at Snapchat. But really, we do a lot of research around figuring out what the product team should be working on. So it's a lot of foundational and opportunity-driven research where we're looking at competitors, we're looking at teens here in the United States, teens in India, or whatever it might be, and pulling out a lot of opportunities through kind of like behaviors or things that they're doing that we might be able to do on Snapchat. So really, we're the center, which is kind of nice. And then product and design kind of work off of what we're saying. Sometimes they go off and do their own thing, which is totally fine. But then we usually will get looped in, or I'll see it and be like, hey, we need to talk really quickly and do some usability on that before we launch. But yeah, research is really, we've gotten to a point now where it's kind of in the center of like a lot of the decisions that we're making, which is awesome.
That's amazing. Cindy, what about you?
Yeah, I think with us, we really we have to start thinking about or talking about design. So we have a chief design officer, which is not, common at that C-level group, and who's awesome. And she completely sponsors and supports research. And I think that's where it really trickles down, just that the design really has a seat at the table, which is also unique for like a P2P money, fintech app. So I think that's what also makes us unique in that we also do kind of operate in that like pillar system of everyone's embedded model. So we have our product teams based on their business units, but we also really focus a lot on like horizontal research that kind of cuts across the different disciplines. So if our kind of topic of the quarter is kind of social money, or it's on kind of trust and safety, fraud, then kind of all of us kind of come together very easily. So we're very flexible in that. And I think also because our data team is a little bit more nascent than our design and our research, I think we also have carry that responsibility of really being kind of first in line in terms of like user insights and voicing. So yeah.
So would you say you're kind of more part of the design culture that's at CashApp, or is it kind of a balance between kind of what product management is all about and design, kind of somewhere in between?
I think we're definitely somewhere in between. We do kind of report up to design as kind of just org structure wise, but I think we really do get that push for design just being such a central part of CashApp's DNA. So yeah.
When you're talking, Morgan, about this foundational research, right? I think one of the things that I can imagine being incredibly difficult is this idea that a user's journey in a product is heavily influenced by many other users who are having their own journeys in the product. So it's not so much a singular line user journey. It's kind of like a heavily weaved rope that like pulls a massive tugboat kind of thing like that. Can you speak to that complexity? Have I accurately assessed the challenge there?
Yeah, definitely. That was kind of like alluding to my comment earlier where like the UX isn't really the focus of our platform and the usability. But I think you're also kind of talking about like Snapchat is a social, alive thing. So we have to look at it as I'm using this platform with a network of people. if a user does something, it's going to affect a bunch of different people and probably shift their motivation or change their behavior in a way. So it's really interesting for us to do these type of studies that look at kind of the network effect. We also don't really have, I think, so I started my career at Zillow, where we had a very, very specific, we needed a user to reach out to an agent. So it's like everyone was working on making sure the website allowed the user to do that. So it's really clear we can do some task analysis, we can do time on task, get us to where we needed to go. When I started at Snapchat, I've been there, I think, almost 7 years, which is wild. I got there and I was like, what are we trying to have users do? And not a single person at the company could answer that. Because everyone, like really every single person at the company has a different goal. Like if they're in engineering, they're trying to get the user to do this. If the designer is trying to get the user to do this, and it kind of showed in our product. So our job, like we really started by understanding like what are the motivations and what are kind of like the use cases that we can like break our user group into like wanting to do. And then can we start kind of understanding small journeys, we just call them use cases, or like what are the tasks that a user needs to complete that task or that use case. So that's kind of how we look at it. Again, you can come into Snapchat and do a million things, and that's fine for us. We have a couple happy paths that we would like you to do, especially if like you're like gonna churn, or there's a bunch of different kind of use cases that we look at, but really it's a choose your own adventure, which makes it really hard to do research, but we've kind of figured it out through different use cases.
Do you think that the fact that's the case, that it's so difficult and whatnot, was the fact that your team is the one searching for many of these opportunities and being that focusing function, is that a result, do you think, of that kind of environment and product situation?
Yeah, I mean, this really also just is like our CEO's philosophy of building Snapchat, where like we see a lot of power of people that are in school at the lunchroom showing their friends how to do like an Easter egg little thing on Snapchat, and it's so cool that they can do it. So like that's kind of what we're built on. So his philosophy from the beginning is like they'll figure it out kind of thing. So we don't need to be doing a lot of these like usability studies. We were talking about it earlier in the group there. Like my journey through Snapchat there's been a lot of different types of research I've done depending on what the company needed. So in the beginning, it was a lot of like, who are our users? Like, what are they doing? Like a lot of that kind of information finding. Then it kind of went into opportunities. Again, like everything was an opportunity. Like, how are we going to beat Instagram? Like, what are we going to do? Like, what's TikTok doing? That piece. Now we're kind of actually going back into this like UX focus, like let's simplify the app. Let's not make it harder for users as we're trying to grow now. Make it harder for them to do the basic things. So now we're doing a lot more of these type of like usability evaluative studies. So it's been all over the place, kind of depending on whatever the product has needed.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cindy, when you think about how users are coming into the CashApp experience, right? I imagine it's often somebody's trying to send me money. So that's pretty strong motivator, I would say, in general. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So how does that, when you think about mapping journeys and doing research on those journeys, the fact that again you have this intermingled experience, social experience, how does that play into how you organize the work for your end?
Yeah, totally. So we were actually looking recently on kind of, do we have a churn problem? We're looking at drop-off data, but we actually realized we have activation problem because
Really?
we would get people would often come to like referrals or promos, like get $5 if you download the app, and then there were like, it was very clunky experience from like the moment you get that text from somebody that to actually getting that money by completing the steps that's needed for referral bonus. There were like 20 steps. And that was only, we were only able to find out through our kind of our happy path research work that we did with completely new users who are using Zelle, Venmo, others, but haven't. And then kind of mimicking that scenario of like, oh, hey, you got this text message, and like what steps would you go through? So that journey is absolutely important. And also because us being kind of a fintech app and financial institution, we ask a bunch of questions up front about like, your identity and confirmation and verification. And I think that didn't help. And I think so we have to kind of understand, looking at the journey in itself, like what is absolutely necessary to front load versus something that could be filled later. What's the actual job that they're coming here to do? And I think, we can't really look at our user kind of research without looking at all of the steps. involved, especially in activation onboarding. And it's a little bit more unique than kind of like you just sign up for it and I just give them an email, then you're done, you're a member, versus actually being a CashApp customer.
That's interesting. Do you think that, and by the way, for those at home, you can just drop questions in the chat and I will try and weave them in. Easy peasy. Yeah, well, it's harder to do that. We'll get to questions from here afterwards. But for the people at home, I can kind of scan them as we're chatting. So is it actually more helpful when you think about what CashApp is used for, to think of things like a motivator rather than a job to be done, right? Because a lot of these frameworks, again, they seem to be more business tool oriented and maybe are less helpful in this context. Would you say that's true? Or are there different ways you think about why people are coming into the app rather than this job to be done type of framework?
Yeah, I think the jobs to be done framework could absolutely still be applied, even to something like this. I was actually thinking kind of about so previous to CashApp, I was at Coinbase, which is a crypto company, and we were launching this new product called Remittances, which is essentially sending money overseas. And what we learned was that even though it's a P2P transaction inherently, it's very social and emotional, because a lot of times you just think about somebody sending money that they made here back to Mexico. That was this place that we launched first. And it's usually to their family or friends. So there's that social emotional component to it. And I think that in itself is a big motivator, that they want to, care for their community, care for their family, and therefore they need something absolutely trust. They may pay a little bit more or go through a little bit more inconvenience to make sure that the receiver gets it. It's a bit different from transactional, kind of I'm buying something, so here's the money, or I'm paying for parking. So I think you can still kind of fit in that kind of JTBD framework and think about the motivators. I think it's just you have to think about the social emotional components.
What about you, Morgan? Does that apply as well?
Yeah, definitely. Again, I think our core audience, as well as teenagers, who are very motivated in a lot of ways that maybe wouldn't make sense to us. So we spend a lot of time trying to understand what does it mean to connect, and why are you motivated to do X, Y, and Z, which we're seeing in the data. What does this actually mean? And then can we pull out some motivations for understanding why they're doing that? And that's where a lot of our design projects come from, because it's we'll understand users are motivated to do whatever, and then we can build products or whatever that make them do that a lot easier. So I think a lot of the things that we do on the research team are trying to understand the why or that motivation behind it.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges for doing this kind of research, broadly speaking? Because we're talking a little bit about the intermingled journeys part of it. Are there other things that are just, I don't want to say impossibly difficult, but I can imagine this is hard. Something that stands out?
I think for me, is again, speaking about teenagers, is they have their own language, and they do really...
Those darn kids.
And it changes daily. So that's a hard thing for us. And it's always there's a bunch of underlying reasons why that do not make sense to me.
No cap.
Yeah. First of all, the language they're using is tough, but also, yeah, there's a lot. Also, Snapchat is a place for close friends. So we've it's not this broadcasting type of place where you want to show off to your friends. So there's a lot of inherent anxiety almost around connecting on Snapchat, which they all want to do. So the answer is yes, both from a UX usability standpoint, not having clear tasks that we want them to go through, but also on just the information side and getting information that we need. It's very difficult. Yeah, because they don't even know what they're trying to do. They're I'm on Snapchat because my friends are here. And it's okay, what else?
100%. I'm literally getting text messages right now from people who are embarrassed for me after first saying no cap. For real. Another one. FR, right? That's okay. Cindy, let's pretend that never happened and just move on.
Oh, I was going to say, so yeah, we definitely do have to think about kind of in context of P2P. I mean, Coinbase, CashApp, they do a bunch of other things. Is that we have to think about from sender's perspective as well as the receiver's perspective, and they're a bit different in terms of motivation and the necessities, right? So I think sender so remittances, we have this term that it's actually a receiver's game, and that kind of if the receiver doesn't, if you think about a vendor who doesn't take CashApp. You can't like force. I mean, you could, and we would love that. But most of the time, they have like lists of platforms that they accept payment from, right? So a lot of times it becomes a receiver's game, and then so someone has to kind of figure out. And usually that's kind of what from research we've learned is the way things go. So then you can't just like demand somebody accept payment in this form that's not accepted in your country or that you're not comfortable in. And so for the receivers, and if that is the case, receivers will need a lot more hand-holding and onboarding and all of that. So we definitely think about that. And it should be customized based on kind of, are you trying to send money? Are you trying to receive money? Or are you trying to do banking? Are you trying to just shopping experience? So all of those things I think we definitely have to be mindful of.
Right. That's super interesting. So someone just dropped a question coming back to the culture area, which is for you, Morgan. The culture that projects are initiated by researchers, that research is looped in after the fact. Was this always the culture at Snap? And what can researchers do to manifest this? Because I feel like we're all like, oh my God, that's so cool. How do I have that?
So I've been at Snapchat for 7 years now. And when I joined, no one even had heard of the word UX. There was no UX designers. No, they definitely didn't know what UX research was. So it's been a very, upward battle that we've gotten to the point that we are today.
Can I interrupt you there?
Yeah.
Like upward battle. Okay. Yeah. What are some of the battles, right? Because
I
feel like we can all be like,
research.
Oh my God, this is hard trying to get the buy-in and do the this and do the that. Like, can you speak a little bit more to like some of the tangible things where we were like this, I fought this battle, and now we're like that and things are better?
I could write a whole series of books on the battles that we've been through at Snapchat. A lot of it comes down to us not having clear product goals or tasks. Again, every single person at the company was working on something different, and it was showing up in the app. So it's really hard as a researcher to try and improve anything or really do anything without understanding like what kind of the high level goals were. So that was a problem. I had a CEO who didn't want to hear anything I had to say. So I think a lot of people experienced that, or he just didn't trust, I think, the information that I was telling him. So when I started, it was a lot of case studies where I would do the research, put together, I'm like, okay, this is what your decision was. We could have done this. This was like what happened. And making sure that like I just kept showing people that. So eventually, again, after 7 years, now they really trust me. They trust my team. I also have an amazing team, by the way. It's been
round of applause.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been a struggle, but we're there and it feels really good. I think we're also one more point I brought up to the group earlier was that figuring out, like, it's my job as a researcher to know what the team and the company need. If I'm sitting here doing usability work and my CEO is like, I don't care about the usability, then he doesn't care about me or what I'm doing. It's like, so I had to figure out, like, what does he care about? What do my stakeholders care about? And getting them that information in the right way at the right time. That's where like success really happens. And that's, I think, once I started figuring that out, and then how to communicate to a bunch of different people who speak different languages per se at the company, like the engineers and designers, figuring out how to talk to all these people the right way. That's where.
So the good news is in only 6 short years, you
7 years later.
7 years, sorry. So I want to end on one final question, then we can take some more questions from the audience here. But when you think about the work, Cindy, what do you find most rewarding and compelling about doing this kind of research in the social space, building products for people to really interact with each other? Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's that kind of social emotional connection people have to the product that I think I have worked on SaaS products and enterprise, and nothing wrong with that. But just that things that just go beyond, right? And that kind of, as Catherine talked about, that kind of experiential aspect of it. That goes beyond just like, I just got to do this thing. And even in domains such as money, which is, inherently private, and something that, scary and boring. So I think that's kind of the most like revealing, and it just makes you feel good about contributing, build products that kind of makes people happier, more joyful, that has more depth to it than just like, gotta get this done and how do I use this computer. So for me, I think that's been kind of the joy of it. And I think that also as a researcher, it's really important to build that report in order to get there with your users, right? Like they're not going to just tell you about how they feel or emotions and, touchy-feely topics, and to build that depth and thinking creatively about how do we get there to get those insights without just asking them how do you feel, in that kind of blunt way. I think that's been kind of a gem.
Yeah, awesome. Morgan, what about you?
That's a good question. I love working at Snapchat for a million different reasons. But I think the main thing is like Snapchat is about connecting people, and that's like what we're really focused on. So I think it's this sound corny, but like literally listening to people and like their streak that they've had with their grandma for 300 days, and they would have never seen their grandma unless they were sending streaks. So it's like the little stories like that where it's like, hey, all this hard work and we're like working on all this back end stuff, but then you see it coming to life with the users and how like important this product is to their joy and their happiness and their fun, to like what you were talking about earlier. Like that's the piece that I love the most.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful.
That's great stuff. Quick round of applause for our two panelists here. You're amazing.